Ben Riggs presents Reading D&D Aloud. Episode 65, recorded live at Gen Con 2025, Solving the Mysteries of the D&D Business.
Hello, to those of you for whom this is hour 2, thank you. If you were not at hour 1, I am Ben Riggs, the apparently controversial D&D historian. I have been disinvited from seminars. Matt Colville blocked me on Twitter, which is too bad because he's a genius. I love Matt Colville. But I am the author of Slaying the Dragon, A Secret History of Dungeons & Dragons. It was one of Goodreads' top 10 books of 2022 in the history category. Apparently it's really good. People tell me they've read it multiple times. People in the book industry keep telling me my next book needs to be like the first one, which I assume is a compliment. I have a podcast. It is currently titled Reading D&D Aloud. I have flyers up here. We do not read D&D aloud. It has morphed, but I only have old materials, and it's still under Reading D&D Aloud. It's really more of a conversation podcast at this point. The episode where I had D&D 5e designer Mike Merles and Shadow Art designer Kelsey Dion popped to mind. Please come up here. It's sold out. If you need space, you're gonna have to sit next to me, and that's okay. I don't know this guy, and he's up here at the table. Please come. Feel free to sit up here. So don't be shy. Come on in. We're sold out. There's a couple seats here. You can sit up here if you want to. That's totally fine. I'll make some space. You can also find me on Facebook. I mostly post about D&D history. Occasionally I will post about how I think we have a need of a new constitution in the United States, which I hope is at least so weird that it irritates everyone politically and not just one side. I am working on a second book of D&D history, tentatively titled Total Party Kill, The Battle for the Soul of D&D in the 21st Century. This presentation is a part of that research. Again, in February, you have to turn these topics in, right? And I'm like, well, whatever I do at Gen Con, it's going to be, I've interviewed dozens and dozens of former Wizards employees at this point. What the hell are they telling me? That's what this seminar is going to be. Over time, it has morphed, I would say, into the following. I think I would now describe it as this: solving the mysteries of the D&D business. And again, this is me. I collected your tickets. I talked about all those things. Okay, great. Let's begin.
Well, Patreon.
Pardon?
Patreon too. I
do have a Patreon, but the podcast has to be the entry, the entry drug. So.
You have to watch it. Or listen to the earlier version, just different reading D&D before.
I'm going to say, ask me at the end, because I timed this and I am up against it, so I'm going to have to see how quickly I can do this. So for my next book, as I mentioned, I've interviewed dozens of current and former Wizards employees. I'm here to share some interesting insights from the process. Not everything I'm going to tell you has been thoroughly fact-checked yet. I have a source for everything, but again, I'm just early in my process yet, so not everyone that I've talked to has seen this yet. If you are a former Wizards employee or simply have firsthand knowledge of what I'm going to talk about, and you want to tell me I'm wrong, please email me at admin@readingdndaloud.net. So take all of that with a grain of salt, but I am titling this talk, Solving the Mysteries of the D&D Business. And I'm framing it this way because when I go online, I see that being a D&D fan in 2025 is really confusing. D&D is almost certainly bigger than it's ever been, perhaps exponentially so. It has a cultural place more akin to rock and roll in 1969 than a mere game. It's a pastime which huge numbers of people under 30 play, and if they don't play it, they're interested in playing it. At the same time that the cultural imprint of D&D is larger than ever. Please come up here. There's a couple seats, and you can sit next to me if you want to, and I'm not joking. At the same time, the cultural imprint of the game has become larger than ever. The business of making the game has become, from the outside, bizarre, alienating, mercurial. The questions just come on and on. Why do extensive promotion of a virtual tabletop for D&D, Sigil, give it no marketing at rollout, and then basically kill it a month later? Why has there been an exodus of staff from the company? Why, after a golden age during the game's 5th edition, has Wizards struggled to find its footing since the debut of 2024 D&D? And I am going to try and answer those questions as quickly and thoroughly as possible. I think the shortest answer, though, would be this. Wizards Hasbro would really like D&D to be something else. They would love it if it was a different, more profitable product, like a video game. Now, to spin that summary out into a few paragraphs, creating a tabletop role-playing game is really, really difficult. You could even argue it's a bad business. Maybe it's a business that you don't want to be in. Let us list the difficulties. So, creating a good role-playing game is expensive. Sales to the book trade are returnable. One set of rules can be shared by many people. Once you have a set of rules, you never need to buy another. If you are evil aligned, you can just steal the PDFs for free. In the 3rd and 4th edition era, a D&D core book probably sold around 500,000 copies, which sounds like a lot, but that does not produce the billions and billions of dollars in profits that is always going to be the end goal of an international corporation like Hasbro. So it is likely that in a given year, Dungeons & Dragons generates 1/10 of what Magic the Gathering generates, maybe even less. I had one D&D CEO tell me that in his entire, Wizards of the Coast CEO tell me that in his entire time being CEO of Wizards, he only ever made 2 decisions about D&D because it wasn't worth his time to even talk about it. These facts set up a terrible cycle of reasoning within the minds of your average MBA. Firstly, most executives at Wizards are not D&D players. There's some, but by no means is that the norm. These guys and ladies look at the D&D business and just see an unprofitable business. Why isn't it making money? Because D&D is not making them a ton of money. D&D is treated as a pariah at Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. Because it's an unprofitable pariah. They keep trying to turn it into something else. A video game, an app, a virtual tabletop, etc. But because it is an unprofitable pariah, these attempts are chronically underfunded or choked off prematurely. Short-term profits are prized over long-term growth or quality of the product, and so the digital D&D efforts by the company crash and burn, putting us exactly back where we were when we started, with some D&D executive bigwig talking about a digital transition for the brand, a goal the company has been reaching towards for a quarter of a century now, but has never achieved. This is the cycle of digital D&D, a theme that we're going to return to again and again in the next hour. It's a pariah brand. Executives want to turn it into something else, while underfunding attempts to do so, valuing short-term profits over long-term quality and gains, which leads to axing the initial attempt. I'm going to give you a whirlwind tour of this now over the last 25 years. We're going to mostly hear about video games because it's just what I've done the most research on this year. But I'm guessing that there's a lot of similar stories that are going to come out about the D&D movie and a few other D&D initiatives over the past quarter century. Let us begin in the early 21st century. Wizards and D&D were new to Hasbro. And at this early date, we can already see this pattern emerging. Wizards of the Coast founder Peter Adkison and Gen Con co-owner has a D&D MMO under development. Now, Adkison is a D&D fan. He understood the game. I would have loved to have played a D&D MMO that he developed and brought to market, but it never happened. because in 2000, Hasbro sold Hasbro Interactive, which is what they use to manage all the digital rights of all of their games. They sold that to Atari. It wasn't Atari at the time, but just for the purpose of this seminar, I'm going to call it Atari because it's going to be Atari later. And we all know what Atari is. So. According to the Associated Press, this deal gave Atari, quote, exclusive rights for 15 years to develop interactive versions of Hasbro products like Monopoly, Scrabble, and Mr. Potato Head, unquote. Unmentioned is the fact that D&D is also in this lump of IP sent to Atari. Obviously, this deal strangles Adkisson's D&D MMO in the cradle. All the money they spent on it evaporates. All the work comes to nothing. The short-term licensing product outweigh the long-term benefits and risks of Adkisson's MMO. Is it a quick question?
Yeah. Is this why BioWare lost rights to Baldur's Gate?
That's a separate story that I don't know the answer to yet.
All right.
But so yeah, Baldur's Gate I've not done a ton of research on yet. So, but there's a little bit in here. But I'm not going to give a good answer because I don't know for sure. Adkisson is so irritated by this that he leaves Hasbro. Like, I want to say he was there for like 2 years. This event in 2001 for us is going to be a historical marker. It's the first time Hasbro axed a digital D&D initiative before it could come to full flower, but it will not be the last. And it is worth pointing, all of this is happening 4 years before the release of World of Warcraft. Imagine a world where they could have gotten a D&D MMO out the door before World of Warcraft. Who knows what that world looks like? Yeah, maybe it flops, but I'd rather have the D&D MMO come out beforehand than afterwards, which is what is actually going to happen. Hasbro does not even realize the caliber of disaster that it has in its hands by selling D&D's IP to Atari. Hasbro, a few years later, actually buys back all of its IP from Atari except D&D. It was a real salt in the open wound moment for the D&D team at Wizards of the Coast. Liz Shue, who will eventually become the D&D head of marketing, vividly remembers the meeting where the buyback of Hasbro IP was announced. It was in 2005, and the Wizards of the Coast staff was digitally zooming in to the this Hasbro all-hands meeting in Rhode Island. Liz Shue described the moment thusly, quote, "The head of licensing, a woman named Jane Ritson Parsons, stood up and said, 'We have gotten all of our rights back from Atari!' And this cheer goes up in the Hasbro offices in Rhode Island. And everybody at Wizards of the Coast just looks at each other because we all knew that they had left D&D behind. They had left D&D with Atari. We looked at each other like, did she just say that? She just said they got everything back and everybody cheered. Nobody in that room knows that they left Dungeons & Dragons behind. The only property worth anything in the digital space. They left it with Atari. Now think about that. What did Atari do with those rights? Nothing. They did nothing, end quote. And nearly a decade is going to pass with Hasbro doing nothing else to get those rights back from Atari. Why? It's D&D again as pariah. Nobody at Hasbro saw the value in trying to get the D&D IP back. Meanwhile, Atari gives the rights to make a D&D MMO to a company called Turbine. It gets released after World of Warcraft. It's not a hit. You're going to end up with a lawsuit between Turbine and Atari that I don't have time to talk about right now because I'm already behind. Wizards of the Coast executives, though, in 2005, see, hey, World of Warcraft is a hit. We should do something like that. Why don't we do something? And again, Peter Adkisson just had to be whispering into a cold beverage if he could have known that was happening. Obviously, Wizards cannot catch up by making an MMO or a video game, since they're not allowed to make a D&D video game, so they decided to try and make D&D more like a video game than a tabletop analog role-playing game. Hence, one of the instructions to the 4th edition D&D designers is, make a version of D&D that's going to attract WoW players. Along with this, executives began funding something called Project Cornerstone, which has 3 parts. There's going to be a digital platform for 4th edition, hopefully a rules compendium, character builder, and virtual tabletop. There's going to be an online marketplace, something kind of like Steam, but this was before Steam. And lastly, there's going to be a social media platform called Gleemax, which turns out to be real weird. They are going to invest tens of millions of dollars of this into this project, and it goes essentially nowhere. About the only thing that ever sees the light of day are a character builder and rules compendium for 4th edition, which 4th edition which you could get for $7.95 a month and download to your computer. 4th edition designers are going to say this is one of the reasons they believe there were poor sales for D&D 4th edition. Because why buy the books when for $7.95 a month you can just download everything? And you can just subscribe for 1 month, download it, and then cancel your subscription, which is obviously way cheaper than buying all the books. And Gleemax also saw the light of day. It was real weird, and I just don't have the time to talk about it right now, but Google it, it's messed up. They had 70 people working on this team. Condensing. All right. We are now in 2008, 7 years past the death of Peter Adkison's MMO. And in that time, despite vast sums of money and effort, Wizards Hasbro still does not have a hit in the digital space. Finally, in 2009, they sue Atari in an attempt to get the D&D rights back. They claim, quote, Dungeons & Dragons is owned by Hasbro's wholly owned subsidiary, Wizards of the Coast, who discovered earlier this year that Atari may have entered into an unauthorized sub-licensing relationship with Namco Bandai partners for the Dungeons & Dragons digital game rights. And you may ask yourself, why does Wizards Hasbro care so much about their licensee working with Namco Bandai? And Liz Shu again provides an explanation. She says, quote, Hasbro considered Namco Bandai to be a competitor. Why? I don't know. Hasbro always has this list of competitors that we can't work with. We won't work with, we'll never work with. Lego was on that list forever until about a year ago, and Namco Bandai was on that list. We can't work with Namco Bandai. So Atari sold the rights to Namco Bandai, the European rights, apparently without telling Hasbro. That's what Hasbro bids the lawsuit on. So suddenly the D&D rights were of interest to Hasbro because they were concerned that a competitor had them. Not that they cared about D&D in my estimation, but because they didn't want Namco Bandai to have any Hasbro properties. So that's what finally prompted the lawsuit against Atari. 2 years later, the suit is settled out of court, and the digital rights are returned to Wizards Hasbro. It's now 2011, 10 years past the death of Adkison's MMO, and Wizards is at last free to develop a D&D video game. This will prompt one of the best decisions made in the history of D&D in the 21st century, the hiring of Nathan Stewart. Nathan Stewart is a godfather of the golden age of 5e. He is as sharp as a knife and charming as hell. He had extensive video game experience, most notably working on Madden. And when he was hired, it was with the understanding that he was going to digitize D&D. He was going to make a D&D video game. We are now in 2012, which is one of the nadirs, the low points of in the history of D&D. 4th edition is languishing. Paizo is ascendant. When Stewart is hired on, the brand itself is in such poor straits that he decides analog D&D, tabletop D&D, needs to be put in its proper position before a video game could even be attempted. To cite a disturbing fact, every edition of D&D sold less than the one before it as of 2012. Second sold worse than first. Third sold worse than second. 3.5th sold worse than third. And fourth sold worse than that. Fourth is the only edition I don't have any hard data for, which is why it's not on here. But the 4th edition guys all tell me, oh yeah, we sold worse than 3.5. So just imagine even lower one down here on the right for 4th edition. And I love this chart because I think it explains so much about the business of D&D. Obviously, a 5th edition of the game is going to be needed. if creators could not make a version of the game that would lure players back, it may very well be the last edition of D&D. Now, D&D did benefit from its status as a pariah at Wizards in some ways. One of the co-leads on 5e, Mike Merle, said that he like stole D&D. He just started working on a 5th edition. He didn't ask anyone's permission. He just started doing it, like he was stealing office furniture. And by the time they were so far underway, he felt like no one in charge could have possibly told him not to do it. Because, well, our plan is 5th edition. What's your plan? Do you have one? No? Okay. Nathan Stewart also protected the D&D team from the higher ups at Wizards. They were like, how long is playtesting going to go on? And Nathan Stewart is like, it's going to go on as long as it needs to. Playtesting is a process whereby you get information. Like, if you don't get the information you need, you're not done playtesting. You're not going to rush this to market. The 4th edition guys, by the way, did tell stories about their playtesting being cut off early, but that's a separate story. Stewart, being a video game guy, also wanted 5th edition to launch with a suite of digital tools. He was hoping for a virtual tabletop, a character creator, an online character creator, and some sort of rules compendium. He took bids from software companies, and one came in at $5 million. He goes to the Wizards executive leadership team, and he's like, hey, there's a company that will build us these tools for $5 million to go with 5th edition. You brought me here to digitize D&D. Can I do it? And the answer he gets back is no! Wizards is again unwilling to invest in D&D, even when their whole plan is to make a digital move with the game. Stewart also makes one of the decisions here that I think is responsible for the golden age of 5e, which is he takes the D&D team and moves all of D&D's production underneath him. Before this, like, you'd have people working on Magic the Gathering 90% of the time and D&D 10% of the time, and it was just too much. You couldn't get everyone together for a meeting. And Nathan Stewart says, just give everyone to me. Take these people off D&D, put these people on it full time, fire these people, sadly, and just put them under me. Stewart said he thought that other vice presidents were relieved to have D&D taken off their plates because the brand had been a black hole which they had failed to revitalize for years. Again, it is D&D as pariah within Wizards that allowed this. Stewart said the transition to the studio model happened shockingly fast by corporate standards, like other VPs were only too happy to pass the hot potato of failing D&D to Nathan Stewart. Everyone who touched D&D was now directly under Nathan Stewart. Many of the people working on D&D described this as their best time working on the game. And success followed, which not exclusively due to this, but I think it's one of the factors. Streaming, Stranger Things, they all drove people to D&D, where they discovered that 5e was great. Sales of the core books increased over time, which is the first time since the 70s and 80s that the core books came out. Year 2, they did better. Year 3, they did better. What was described to me was, and again, I don't have the sales numbers, but the sales trend was described to me, which was they actually went up every year, which hadn't happened again since 1982, I believe. The ship had been righted, and finally, Nathan Stewart could launch himself at the job he was hired to do, making a great D&D video game. And as an aside, I want to point out, you could say that one of the only reasons for the golden age of 5e was Nathan Stewart just getting the brand polished up to make a video game. So Stewart begins discussions with Larian Studios, publishers of the Divinity line of video games, about creating Baldur's Gate 3. And I want to remind you, he was hired for this. He is hired to make sure that a video game is made and it's successful. We're 15 years or so past Adkisson's dead MMO. Therefore, Stewart creates the following plan. Wizards of the Coast would co-publish Baldur's Gate 3 with Larian Studios. Wizards would either be a majority co-publisher and provide 60% of the game's funding, or be a minority co-publisher and provide 30% of the game's funding. He proposed the deal to Larian CEO Sven Vinke over dinner before PAX Dev, and Vinke was very interested in the proposal. Now he just needed to bring Wizards Hasbro on board. And again, you'd think it'd be an easy yes. This is the culmination of the Corp's plan for D&D. Turn it into a digital product, then make tons of money off that product. Better yet, it doesn't require Wizards to hire dozens and dozens of developers and programmers. They just need to fund Larian. With Larian already on board, Stewart was excited to take the proposal to the Wizards executive leadership team. Stewart described what happened next in the following manner, quote, "I took that presentation and the wind in my sail from Sven's excitement and presented the opportunity to the Wizards executive leadership team. At that time, Wizards was run by Greg Leeds, and besides my boss, Jerome Lowland, and all of the executive leadership team, At that time, Wizards was run by Greg Leeds, and besides my boss, Jerome Lowland, all of the executive leadership team, including Greg, were focused on growing Magic the Gathering. Some of the leadership team may have had a place in their heart for D&D as a player or fan, but it never translated into meaningful support in business decisions. And I just want to repeat that. Even if they were fans or liked the game, it never translated into meaningful support in business decisions. So I had the support of Jerome and presented to Greg Leeds and his leadership team. The meeting was short and the decision simple. Greg was not interested in pursuing a co-dev or co-publishing deal, and if we wanted to make Baldur's Gate 3, then we should pivot to a straight licensing deal. I was also instructed to get us the best royalty rates possible because Baldur's Gate was a premium license, so I looped in the licensing team, and Sven happily worked out a deal in that structure. Again, Wizards wants D&D to be something else, but we see that Wizards is unwilling to take a risk on investing in D&D for a larger slice of profits because to some degree, Wizards does not believe in D&D. There is a fascinating endpoint coda here. It's easy to paint this decision as a blunder because we all know Baldur's Gate was a great game and a huge hit. So it's easy to say these executives were wrong and they should have taken that co-publishing deal. But Liz Shue, D&D marketing maven extraordinaire, adds a note to the tale. Liz Shue said, quote, "Had we invested, had we partnered with Sven, we probably would have forced that game off before it was ready and it wouldn't have been as good. Hasbro would have forced that game out before it was ready if they had money in it," which is quite a statement left for us left to chew over, and provides a clue to the psychology of the people driving the business of the creation of D&D. Shue is saying that the leadership of Wizards was only thinking about short-term profits, not the quality of the product or long-term products. How am I doing on time? Okay, I'm doing okay. Are the people in the pack going to be okay if I sit down? I'm going to do my best. All right. I'm sorry. So video games are the foundation of the open gaming license scandal. In 2021, a French video game with the confounding name of Solasta Crown of the Magister was released, and it used the D&D 5e SRD as its core rule set. It didn't talk about D&D, it didn't mention D&D, but the gaming media understood what was happening here. IGN titled their review of the game, quote, "Solasta Crown of the Magister is the best D&D video game I've ever seen, and it's not even a D&D game. PC Gamer described it as the truest virtual representation of a D&D rule set. And for literal decades now, Wizards have been trying to make a D&D video game, and this French company does it, and they don't even have to pay licensing fees to Wizards of the Coast. This is from what I have heard, one of the foundational reasons for the OGL scandal, because Wizards is like, we cannot have an open gaming license that allows competing video game products to use our rules to make video games. I'm going to stand up because I don't like not seeing the people. The whole plan is make D&D into a video game franchise, and if anyone can make a D&D video game, what is the point, what is the value of this thing we have? So the decision was made, well, we need to revise the OGL to cover this. And then they were like, well, as long as we're revising it, let's just make it violently biased in our favor, and from thence, the entire OGL scandal surged forth. I did a whole hour on it last year, so I'm just kind of summarizing here. Join my Patreon if you want to hear that hour from last year. By 2020, D&D is generating $125 million a year in revenue. That is exponential growth. My understanding is in like 2014, 2015, it brought in about $25 million in revenue. This should have been a huge cause for celebration. It did, however, bring D&D to the attention of executives. The D&D staff described this as the eye of Sauron just turning slowly towards them. The majority of the staff responsible for making D&D 5e would be gone in the next few years. Hasbro wanted to take D&D and have it grow exponentially again. Therefore, a lot of the people responsible for the game's previous exponential growth were pushed aside one way or another. There was this attitude that despite their success, the D&D studio folks just didn't really know what they were doing, and adults needed to be brought in who would really take D&D to the next level. For example, D&D was taken away from Nathan Stewart and given to Jeffrey Stiefel, the senior VP of the Wizards Digital Game Studio. Now, if the future of D&D is digital, that makes sense, but removing Stewart from direct control of the game really seems to me a mistake. He was made a VP of marketing, a position with more responsibilities, but he was still really upset by that move. And as we wave goodbye to Nathan Stewart, I feel I have to mention that in 2022, Wizards of the Coast purchased D&D Beyond for $146.3 million. And you may recall that when he was first pitching D&D 5e, he wanted to create an app to go with 5e that would have cost $5 million. So again, they went from $5 million to $146.3 million. Wizards had the opportunity to be in the advanced guard of a digital move, but ended up paying huge sums of money just to be late to the party. So the eternal attempt to push D&D into a digital realm, a move forever attempted but never completed, is one of the first reasons for staff turnover at Wizards of the Coast. I could also point to the fact that Wizards fired or retired pretty much everyone who knew how to bring a physical book to market, and since that time, they have had to delay their releases twice because of problems with production. A lot of Dungeons & Dragons employees also described a workplace that was, to say the least, not a lot of fun. The most extreme stories I've heard make working on Dungeons & Dragons sound viciously Machiavellian. It is the only place in the world where you can get paid 6 figures a year to create D&D, and apparently a lot of people working on the game believed that was a privilege worth scheming for. Furthermore, artists and writers both described a pace of production by the end of 5th edition's run that was grueling, akin to crunch in video games. And these are some of the factors that drove so many of the people responsible for the success of D&D out of Wizards of the Coast. Which brings us to our final point, Project Sigil. Sigil was supposed to be a virtual tabletop and a digital toy box. VP Chris Kao was in charge, along with Cale Stutzman. They were the pair that brought Magic the Gathering Arena to market, And that app generates vast sums of money for Wizards of the Coast, making this a logical pair to put in charge of digitizing D&D. They already translated Magic into a hit digital product, so why not put them in charge of doing the same for Dungeons & Dragons? A team of 24 people was assembled. 4th edition D&D designer Andy Collins, who had been fired by Wizards, was hired back to work on Project Sigil. He described Sigil at that time as, quote, a big swing, partially because there were other similar products that were either on the market or close to getting to market. But Sigil was a more robust, in many ways, system, and certainly a more graphically intense game, end quote. But there are problems in adapting D&D that simply do not exist for Magic the Gathering. Just consider spells. There are 361 spells in the player's handbook, and each spell is a mini-game with its own rules, and most of them require some sort of in-game special effect to signal their use. One VFX artist, Eben Bradstreet, worked full-time on completing worked full-time on producing spell animations for Sigil, and he did this for 2 years straight, at the end of which time he completed only 40 spells.
Oh.
And my point here is not that he's lazy or something like that, and other Sigil people describe his work as really high quality, but clearly Sigil is at this point understaffed. The ambitions of Sigil did not meet the resources that were assigned to it, at least at that point. Now, Andy Collins did say also, quote, in a normal digital game development cycle, we would have gotten to about the point where we got, shown this proof of concept, and said, okay, look, this is what we've got so far. Now let's unlock funding and hire 10 or 20 more devs and go to town, end quote. But Project Sigil would never pass that development checkpoint. I also asked why Sigil was so graphically intense. The answer seems to be that Sigil was being pitched to the executives at Hasbro as being some sort of digital toy box that could then be stretched out to other brands. Like, you know, you're buying G.I. Joes to play in this digital toy box, you play for the figure, and then you're paying for, like, you know, a digital M16 to have Flint Fire, whatever. So it was supposed to be for D&D, but then have applications to other Hasbro brands. A year ago, at Gen Con 2024, Sigil debuted with actual play celebrities like Brennan Lee Mulligan, and then it was slated for a February release date. Collins said that they were hyper aware that Sigil had to meet that release date in February because it was supposed to be paired with a marketing push. Collins said, quote, this is the big coming out party for Sigil, and we're going to let everybody know, and everybody's going to be excited. It's important we hit that date so we can take advantage of marketing because Wizards has lots of things they need to market. We were slotted a week or two after the new Monster Manual came out, but a week or two before the next Magic set or something like that, end quote. And lo, February of 2025 came to pass. We are now 24 years past the death of Peter Adkison's MMO, and the Sigil marketing push, if there was one, was more akin to a shove off a cliff. Collins said, quote, there was essentially no marketing position. Those of us who had been around the block a couple times realized, oh, the company doesn't want to spend any more money on this project, end quote. A mere 3 weeks later, Sigil was essentially killed, and the vast majority of the staff working on it was let go. There's still a couple of guys that are apparently doing work on it because it's now being attached to D&D Beyond, but almost all of them are gone. And in some ways, this is a huge shock. For years, maybe even a quarter of a century, Wizards Hasbro has been speaking of a digital future for Dungeons & Dragons. Sigil seemed like the most obvious place to make that future, but they underinvested in the project, released it so quietly it seemed like they were ashamed of it, and then, and this is now total speculation on my part, but I'm assuming they used the lack of success of Sigil as justification to then kill it. Collins said of the moment that Wizards was unwilling to invest in a, quote, virtual tabletop for a franchise that we already know needs a digital arm. Now, Sigil may or may not have been the right answer to it. There's a rational argument for Sigil not being the right take. This is going to be ultimately too expensive, not only to make, but to maintain for the return we think we can get. But I wasn't in any of those rooms, so I can't tell you what those discussions were. I think ultimately the leadership of Wizards and Hasbro did not have faith this was a good expenditure of money, unquote. And I want to remind you, Collins was the lead on 4th edition, which was supposed to pair with the efforts of Project Cornerstone. When I asked him about this, Collins said that on the day he was fired, the second time, he asked himself, oh man, am I just bad luck for D&D software? But as we've seen, the problem here is not Andy Collins. A quarter of a century of history tells us we should not have been surprised that Sigil came to nothing. Adkison had an MMO in the works. It was killed. 4 years later, Wizards attempted to catch up with Project Cornerstone. They axed it early. They could have had something like D&D Beyond for $5 million. They passed and ended up purchasing D&D Beyond for $146.3 million. They could have partnered with Larian on Baldur's Gate 3. They chose not to. And for years, we heard about Project Sigil. I mean, years they were talking about that thing and producing trailers, and they really gave it a shot for like 3 weeks. That's it. The effort to move D&D into a digital space is akin to a black hole of D&D history. Its attraction is so strong, it pulls personnel and projects and vast sums of money toward it, and yet nothing ever seems to come out of it. Wizards desperately wants to make D&D into a digital product, and yet when they're given the chance, they chicken out or cheap out, and instead of being in the vanguard, they are playing catch up. And I want to emphasize here, I don't think these executives are like morons or cowards or something. I think they're likely responding to their own set of rewards and punishments. Consider Chris Kao for a minute here. Chris Kao was one of the brains behind Magic the Gathering Arena, which is how you play Magic the Gathering online. Since he succeeded in making that, he was put in charge of Sigil, and after Sigil failed, and that failure sure seems like Wizards sabotaging itself, Kao was fired. It didn't matter the piles of money Arena made. It didn't matter. All that mattered was that Kao's most recent project failed. Although perhaps, again, I think failed might be in quotation marks there. But Kao is held accountable for that failure and let go. So if you're going to be fired from your exceptionally high-paying job for failure, why take any risks at all? In extreme summary, corporate culture is hobbling the growth and success of Dungeons & Dragons. I think it makes our success in the OGL fight all the more important because it means that we now have the D&D 5e SRD that is ours forever and can't be mucked up by these guys and ladies. And a brief coda. How am I doing? Yes. A brief coda. I want to say that for years, the internet has been accusing D&D 5e designer Mike Merles of malicious acts against fans. And in all my research, I have never seen any proof of it. And when I attempt to get to the bottom of it, it seems like a rumor fed by gossip founded on ignorance. Now, if you are a first-person participant who thinks I have this wrong, I would love to hear about it. Email me at admin@readingdndaloud.net. Otherwise, I would recommend doing what I do when someone repeats this stuff online and ask them about our source, because it really seems like there's no there. So I'm Ben Riggs. Please buy my book, Slaying the Dragon: A Secret History of Dungeons & Dragons. Come check out my podcast, Reading D&D Aloud, where we no longer read D&D aloud. And have a great Gen Con. What question? What questions can I answer? I'll start on the way back. Yep, you, sir.
Yes, given that we recently had a 5e 2024 SRD released into the Creative Commons, but not into the OGL, I'm just a little curious about why they did it for one and not the other. Do you have any insights or speculation there?
My short answer is no. I don't have any insight why they did that. A thing that I'm interested in and haven't looked at though is the new SRD as good as the old SRD? That would be my big question. But no, I have no one has talked about that so far that I'm going to say I don't know. I'm going to be brave enough to say I don't know. Other questions? I'm just going to keep moving forward. Black glasses?
Yeah, you were talking about Mike Merles. I thought that was great. I think, I feel like a lot of people jumping on the controversy with Zach S. Do you feel like that holds up anything? I don't really know.
So, is your question, do I mean what I said?
Yeah. Do you feel like people actually use that as just a jumping point on him?
So, it was when Mike was hired by Chaosium and then left Chaosium that it really struck me. And Mike Merles, again, he gets hired by Chaosium, and the internet comments are just he's an enabler. I want to say they were saying that Mike was an enabler and abuser. They got pretty intense about anti-Mike Merles stuff. And I've interviewed people who worked with Mike that hate his guts, clearly, and told me terrible things about him. And yet, even those people are like, oh yeah, there's no there. There was an internal process to see if Mike had engaged in any wrongdoing. It found that he did not. The internet, again, I kind of hate repeating the internet narrative, but the internet narrative was he did bad things, so he was fired from D&D. He was moved from the less successful D&D to the more successful Magic the Gathering as obvious punishment, right? And that was, and then he was probably fired for it too, because he was fired, but not for that. He was just let go because of Hasbro needed to cut 10%. Mike got fired. And then again, everything the internet says about Mike gets filtered through this. And again, there's never you don't have some bureau of checking internet rumors, seeing if they're true. And I'm well, I guess I'm a historian and journalist. I'm the closest I can get to it. So, I'll hang my tuchus out over the line and say it. I think that, there's no there. Again, if you personally know, if you know a thing that happened to you, please come tell me about it. I would be very, very interested. But again, when I've done my deep dives, I don't see any there. So yes, I mean it.
No, cool. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Other questions? Sir.
I've been playing D&D for about 30 years, and I'm pretty exclusively a pencil and paper D&D player. Until they can give us a VR set, kind of like in Ready Player One, where we can actually go there. I'm not so much interested in the digital world of D&D. Do you have an opinion on what things like Critical Role and other projects have done for the sales of tangible D&D things like the books?
Yes, they raised them. But I forget if it was in this seminar earlier or in the last seminar, but to give a more fulsome answer to that question, D&D does its best when it is attracting new demographics. The only times that D&D sales have increased year over year were in the 70s and 80s, and from 2014 until, I assume, 2020, 2021. They dropped a little bit after the pandemic, and I don't know what's going on now. But I think that what happened in those two eras were, in the initial era, white gamer dudes got super into D&D, and it just kind of flooded that demographic. And then starting in 2014, D&D was successfully opened up to everyone, I would say. And I do think that Critical Role, all the other actual plays, Stranger Things, they all played a huge role in showing, hey, D&D is for everyone, and it's actually cool, guys. You'll like it. And somebody had a question? Yes, sir. Let me see if I can get through everyone.
Mine's kind of a teaching question because I know you're a teacher.
Oh boy.
You mentioned it a lot, but I'm a teacher too. So this cycle you're talking about with D&D, do you think it's similar to what we're seeing in teaching and other things where we're trying to drop this corporate model on something that may be more artistic or more?
I mean, now we're
like education, like how we see the wave of.
Now we're really out there. I would briefly say that corporate capitalism seems to be really good at getting us more toothbrushes. But when your outcomes are human beings in some way or art, it gets way more complicated. The thing that I would actually, the things that I find most illuminating to look at the gaming industry with are Marvel, DC, and movies. Those I think have the most lessons for a TTRPG historian. I don't know. I'm at a really weird Montessori school, so I don't see a bunch of corporate influence on me, but your mileage may vary. Again, every school is basically a ship run by a principal and the local board of education, so it's complicated. And you had a question? Oh, sorry.
So all in all, what was the point of hiring Cynthia Williams if they were just like, nah?
So
She's from Microsoft, she'll do something.
Very briefly, my understanding is this. She was one of the adults brought on board to lead a second exponential growth of D&D. She brought on a bunch of Amazon, Microsoft people who were also going to try and lead some sort of digital growth of D&D that was going to be exponential, and it doesn't seem to have worked out. And the failure of Project Sigil is in actuality a loss of those people. Which is actually bad for D&D. I think that within Wizards Hasbro at this point, they must be we don't know what the heck to do with this. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to make money off of it. And I keep hearing rumors about licensing it. Quickly, and then you, sir. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the 2024, why didn't they call that 5.5?
Oh, God.
Is it part of this larger model that they're hoping that they can sell you new stuff in 2026? Or
my shortest answer is I have not interviewed the people responsible for the name yet. But at a lower level, Ray Winninger, I think, was pushing one D&D, and then Ray Winninger left. Maybe he got fired. Then they changed the name. But that's all I know so far. But there's a story there, and I'll probably get it.
That seems weird.
Yeah. And
A couple things. Why did it take so long for D&D to start selling digital prints?
digital prints, you mean like PDFs?
Yeah.
Because Hasbro was afraid of pirating. They were like, people will pirate it. And now they're kind of like, well, people are going to pirate stuff.
The second thing is, how did they get the license, video game license back from Atari?
From Atari? It was a lawsuit, and they settled out of court. So I couldn't get the court files on it because it was out of court settlement. But the end state was Atari gives the rights back. Okay, go ahead.
So I've asked some of the old designers at TSR.
Sorry, say it again.
I've asked the previous designers at TSR, some recruiters like Ed Greenwood, and this question I'm asking specific. In your background and digging around and messing with the and Hasbro, what's going on with the lack of working back into the old route when they bring it current? It's like you don't read the older materials. And they don't read there's something they have locked up in basics. So they're running into something that's completely contrary to what was published 20 years ago. And they're like, come on, you guys know this.
My most immediate answer is every designer, I don't know that this is exactly true, but most of the designers seem to want to make their own impression on the game. And most might be strong, but there's hubris involved. And my special sauce is going to heal D&D and make the world better. And that is my shortest answer is that when a new designer comes on, they're not like, let's look at what the other guys did to make things work. But what can I do? But that's a very short answer. And I'm sorry, but somebody's going to walk in that door and kick me out of here. Sorry. But thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it.